Boom! Tea time! And you know what it's time to talk about? It's time to talk about Guild Wars 2. That's right. Guild Wars 2, Secrets of the Obscure. It's been about a month since the launch of the expansion. A variety of things have happened. Balance patch, world versus world, world restructuring, alliances, news has come out. I think the thing that we really need to see happen, and I'm very curious how CMC is going to handle this actually in the balance team, is that I think weapon mastery has introduced a bit of a problem to the game.
You just gotta
I think there's
reframe
an
it.
upside to it too, though, right? Like, we're talking about the downsides, and I agree. It is kind of sad seeing these raid pulses fall over in 2 seconds, but I do think the upside is that a lot of people are getting into this content because of the power creep. You know, like when Veil Guardian was like actually like hard when it came out, there's way more people like down to try raids now because it's gotten so much easier.
So maybe this is
Massive
controversial,
difference.
but seeing how dependent the community is on Delta Connected to keep Arc
it's
maintained,
crazy.
do you think it's time for ArenaNet to flip the switch and turn on the DPS meter that already exists in the client and is just disabled, and just give us an official DPS meter so that we're not reliant on the generosity of one programmer to do a DPS meter for a game he doesn't play anymore?
Boom! Tea time! 30 minutes
Wow.
starting soon screen, but we're actually still vaguely on time. This is about 40 minutes earlier than normal, so you're welcome. You're welcome, chat. We're here. We're ready to go. We're ready to blast. And you know what it's time to talk about? It's time to talk about Guild Wars 2. That's right. Guild Wars 2, Secrets of the Obscure. It's been about a month since the launch of the expansion. A variety of things have happened. Balance patch, world versus world, world restructuring, alliances, news has come out. Some other things happened. We got weekly events going on. You know, like, it's the expansion. You know, content has happened. And here with me to discuss it, it is Nike, who is a warrior main, by the way. That's how you know this is going to be good. And we also have Lara, who is not a main, as far as I'm aware. But,
It is my fault
yeah.
that tea time is early today.
That
It's
is
my
true,
fault.
actually.
I did
That
this.
is true. Yeah. You're saying that like it's a bad thing. You're saying that the
Yeah.
chat prefers it if it's late?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Like, people had to get out of bed for this, okay?
That makes sense. But anyway, yeah. Secrets of the Obscure has happened. And of course, there's new patches coming, and we're in this very interesting position, actually, and where we know exactly what is happening and when. In a way, we've got our work cut out for us here as Guild Wars 2 content creators. Normally, we get zero communication, so we have to basically speculate everything. We've got to say, oh, maybe they're releasing Guild Wars 3. Oh, yeah, this is going to be it. It's the year of Guild Wars 2. But this time, we actually know pretty much exactly what's going on here. With all this kind of stuff, with the the next patch coming up, then you've got the Strike CM, right? Then you got new weapons in 6 months. Now, one thing that is interesting is, and we'll hear more about this later. We actually know that there's going to be a beta, I think, for the new weapons coming up very soon, actually. Well, I guess relatively speaking, kind of before next year, apparently, is what's been committed to. So that's pretty exciting stuff, if you ask me. But the first thing I want to talk about, let's just get to it. There was a bit of a balance patch. Of course, we had a lot of power creep that released with the expansion. Relics, pretty good, pretty strong overall. And of course, weapon mastery training, also very powerful, kind of propelling some very powerful builds into relevancy with stuff like the Scourge stuff, of course. Every build, like blasting 45k, 46k, even 49k DPS. Now, I'm just going to say it. My opinion was, patch was actually pretty good. I think people were expecting more, like more reworks and probably some buffs to some underperforming builds. But this patch, what it was supposed to be, very similar to the PvP patch, was just, right, we're just going to de-power creep some stuff, and then there's going to be a larger skills update later on. Because this patch was not the skills update. There's going to be a skills update, I think, somewhere in this quarter at some point that will have kind of the normal stuff. Like, oh yeah, they're going to rework some traits. They're going to buff things. They're going to nerf things, right? They're going to jiggle things around. All that kind of stuff. I think the patch went pretty well, all things considering. They didn't nerf Condi Berserker in PvP, but that's like the thing that was missing, I guess. Not
Is
bad.
that actually a big build in PvP right now?
Oh yeah, that build is disgusting in PvP, yeah.
Nice.
What do you
Yeah,
think,
it was
Nike?
very much a PvE patch, right?
Yeah.
I think the PvP patch was like a couple of weeks ago, kind
Yeah.
of. I like the patch too, though. It's like Yeah, I think it's important to remember it was sort of a follow-up patch instead of like a true like rework. Here's some new options. Here's some new builds.
Yeah.
Kind of. It was very much like just adjust stuff down. But I think the game is actually in a really balanced state now. It kind of feels like 40k is like the magic number. All the DPSs are kind of doing around 40k. There's no real outliers. You know, nerfs are always a little bit painful when you play it, but I want to say that this might be the most balanced Guild 2 has been in a little while. I actually kind of like the patch.
Yeah, things are, certainly in terms of damage numbers, things are in a pretty okay spot. You know, as usual, it's kind of boons that typically end up causing the problems here, right? Like I would say that there's a lot of support builds that are kind of underdeveloped. And that's why I think that's, people were maybe kind of coped up hoping for some like big adjustments, stuff like, oh yeah, we're going to make heal chrono a thing at last, right? Ah yeah, we're going to make quickness warrior a fair bit better and more competitive with stuff like herald, that kind of thing. But yeah, not happening just yet. But yeah, things are in a pretty good spot damage wise, right? Like you can pretty much play anything. But you know what? I feel like this is a really troll statement to make, but realistically, the damage numbers are so high that you know any build is good right now. Like this always comes up when I kind of make tier lists for PvE. It's like it's really hard to say that any build in the game is actually bad at this point. It's like really hard to say that.
You have to try to make a bad build.
You have to kind of put some effort in. But I think the only thing that isn't, there's only like a few weapon combos that aren't good. Stuff like power mirage, right? Like that isn't good. Okay, like that's not a good build, for example. You know, that's not going to work. Or like, I don't know, like Condi Spellbreaker, I guess. That's probably not going to work. So there's a few things that don't really make any sense whatsoever. But yeah, it's in a pretty good spot.
Untamed is back to being just entirely irrelevant. That's a little bit sad. Like there were at least a couple of people playing Untamed before, but now it's like nobody's playing it anymore.
Well, that's why you do need these reworks. And I think that this is something that will always be here, kind of frustrating players, I think, with a lot of these balance patches, is that there are a lot of builds that just kind of need design changes rather than numbers changes. Like, you can play with the numbers all you want, but it's probably not really going to get it to where people want it to be. Like, Untamed, I think, is a great example of that, right? Because it had a lot of functional builds, but it was all really reliant on Fervent Force, right? It was a really weird trait to kind of exist and have the entire profession basically balanced around. And that's gone, so that, you know, dissolved Untamed back into the nothingness, unfortunately. But yeah, you know, give it another couple of years and every elite specialization will get fixed. Yeah, it doesn't. It's
Soul Beast, like Soul Beast is like, okay, it gives you a bunch of free stats and you lose your pet, so you're pumping. That's pretty good for a DPS. And even Druid is like, okay, that's the healer, but there's also like a legit Condi build, very legit Condi build actually right now. Untamed, it's like, I don't even know what I would label it as. It doesn't have a vibe.
Yeah.
It can be like the pets builds, right? Like kind of like the Mechanist of Ranger. Like if you like your pet a lot, you play Untamed.
They could do that.
Yeah. I know, but there is still like a rework patch coming, right? Isn't there? Like this sort of season.
There's a quarterly.
Like that's sort of the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be another patch. It's going to happen there as well, and then everyone can be traumatized as their class gets obliterated by CMC yet again. You know, they're going to keep it going. Some more patches with this kind of stuff there, but yeah, game's in a pretty good spot in this regard, balance-wise, I would say. Overall, patch was good. My raid clear is now like 5 to 10 minutes slower, so I mean, you know, that sucks.
Definitely slower.
My gold per hour is just going through the floor, unfortunately. It really is. You hate to see it. You really hate to see it. But yeah, I just think slapping more boons on stuff is good, and I think we're in a really interesting spot actually. You know, because damage has come down, but I think boon application has stayed very high. You look at stuff like Herald, for example. Herald, you know, and it's really interesting, you know, because on the one hand, I go, you know what? Herald is really overpowered. They should remove the boon output. But the question is that actually a good idea? I'm almost thinking, does that make the game fun, right? Does that make the game more fun at this point? And realistically, I'm not totally sure if it does. You know, I'd almost like to see more builds that are a little bit like Herald existing rather than less. Because builds
you don't take the cheese off the taco just because it's so tasty.
Exactly.
You just put cheese on other on other foods to make them better.
Because Herald does make the game a lot more fun. right? I think that's
It does.
something that's important. But it's also a little bit more than that, right? It's fun to play with boons, but also it really enables a lot of builds. If you have a herald in your group, you know, a quickness herald, you can play basically anything as your healer, and it will probably work out pretty okay. I think there's actually some value in that. So hopefully we kind of see more things like that start to crop up there, because it just takes a lot of pressure off the healer. It allows builds that aren't quite as well-rounded as something like Druid to perform, or Mechanist, for example, to actually fit into these compositions and play out really, really well, I would say, overall, with this kind of stuff. Pretty
I
good.
really like what they did with like the Herald's DPS nerf, because like they nerfed the greatswords, and I think a lot of us were like expecting Vindicator to be like collateral damage, right? But they fought ahead and they buffed Vindicator like back up a little bit. I was like, wow, this is like so unlike ArenaNet. Usually like there's all these builds being collateral damage, but they didn't do it this time.
Yeah.
I guess Renegade is kind of collateral damage.
Renegade was a little bit of collateral damage. Yeah,
but not as much as I thought it would be.
I do feel like Power Renegade isn't meant to exist. They don't see that as like a... Like certain builds are like almost protected by ANET. Like they're like, this is like I don't think ANET cares if Condi Weaver is good or bad, because that's not necessarily their vision for Weaver. Like they want Power Weaver to be good. So if there's a nerf that like negatively impacts Power Weaver, like on accident, they will compensate for that. But if it like did it to Condi Weaver, they wouldn't compensate for it because it's just not a protected build.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for my Stuff Weaver to be good.
One
day.
No, I think it's going to be... You'll enjoy that Sword Warhorn, or Sword Dagger, probably, because...
Enjoy your pistol.
Yeah, oh yeah, pistol main hand. Let's go, yeah. That will definitely be fun. You know, I think the thing that we really need to see happen, and I'm very curious how CMC is going to handle this actually in the balance team, is that I think weapon mastery has introduced a bit of a problem to the game, or rather, no, it hasn't introduced it. It's kind of revealed the problem, and the problem is that a lot of weapons don't really have much of an identity. You know, you run the same weapon everywhere because that's the best weapon. That, you know, I think Warhorn on Elementalist is a really good example of this. It's not just the best damage weapon; it's also the best support weapon at the same time, right? So you go, oh, you know, I could run a focus or a dagger, but oh wait, Warhorn is better than both of them, right? At all of the things that both of those weapons do, and you know, you see this across a couple of builds. You could argue that Scourge Torch is quite similar to this as well, where it's like, oh well, you know, you're just going to run this weapon all the time on all of your builds because these weapons are very, very versatile, very flexible, and they're always good. So I do think we need to see some differentiation, and weapons need to have like in order for weapon mastery, I think, to make sense and to kind of lead to a balanced gameplay experience, I think these weapons need to have a very strong identity.
I agree. I do think that to an extent this is a PvE problem, in that PvE it's either going to be the best in slot support weapon, or it's going to be the best in slot DPS weapon. So there's only ever going to be two good ones, and if there is like a second one that's just as good, you'll have it on swap, so that you can use all the good skills from the one, swap to the other, and use all the good skills on that, and then swap back. And that's just inevitable with PvE because it doesn't ask you to be as dynamic as PvP, where stuff with like niche uses can sort of shine a little.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's certainly less
sort of the same with relics. Like people are like mad. They're like, "Oh, there's not a lot of variety in relics." It's like, well, of course there's not. There's going to be the best heal relic, the best DPS relic, and the best support relic, and that's it. You know, there's not going to be like what did you want? Did you want two relics that both say gain 5% damage? Because okay, now you got two relics that basically essentially do the same thing. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's very hard to do. I think that there is some differentiation to be made, but the problem is, and I think this is something that people tend to forget, is that a lot of this actually hinges on encounter design as well. For example, you could say, well, one relic is really good for single target damage, right? And then one relic is much better for area of effect damage. But the thing is that most Guild Wars 2 encounters are single target, right? So that would essentially devalue and make the single target relic tend to overperform all the time compared to the area relic. We kind of see this with Relic of Akeem and Relic of the Fractal, because of course Relic of Akeem with super OP, right? Just blasting insane DPS on basically every single Condi build. And now Relic of the Fractal kind of outperforms it most of the time. But the differentiation is that Relic of Akeem applies conditions AoE, so you have more area of effect damage. And then, of course, Relic of the Fractal is purely single target. So that's where that differentiation can come in. But the issues you run into is that it's, you know, it's working in tandem with the encounter design. For you to have that type of specialization, you need to have an encounter that actually allows you to apply that specialization. And of course, that's the issue with relics, as you pointed out there, Nike. Yeah, it's like in PvE, you just want to blast as much damage as you possibly can, heal as much as you can, and apply as many boons as you can. So as a result of that, there's going to be pretty obvious choices for relics. There's maybe some room, again, like, you know, if you have a build that is good at reviving, right? Like Relic of Mercy, I think, is actually pretty good on Heal Scourge, for example. Maybe you could have a relic that interacts with Barrier in some way. Could also be relatively exciting. There's some room with support relics, right? Like maybe if Relic of, you know, something like Relic of Mabon, where you can make one of your boons better for a time, or apply some kind of buff to allies, or maybe, you know, Relic of Lear, I think, is a really cool one, actually. It's a bit hard to use right now, but, you know, that's the one where when you heal someone, you give them a little shield that funnels 50% of the damage they take to you. So, you know, you could be really, really tanky and absorb damage for your allies. But again, things would have to be much more active in order for that to be the case, I think. You'd almost have to have a relic key, that like a keybind that you press to activate your relic. And to be honest, I actually think that will be good, but I'm not sure if it would really want another keybind. But I think it could make relics a lot more interesting if you could actually control when some of your relics would actually go off, as opposed to having them like very hidden and very passive. Because I think the relic system was supposed to be almost like giving you an extra skill, another facet to your build, but that doesn't really work when it's kind of tucked away and you can't even see when the cooldown comes back, right? Like the entire telegraphing around that is a bit it's a bit rough.
I actually have a new favorite relic. I've been like learning the kiting on HTCM, and
Okay.
I'm like, there's this one phase where you have to like stun break your team, but you can now use Relic of the Astral Ward, I think it is.
For the resistance.
Which means that if you put up resistance if you like do 2 signets in a row. It's like super niche. Like you would not use that in like almost anywhere in the game. But there's this one specific part in HTCM where it's like super good.
Yeah,
I think the relic system has a lot of like potential in that sense. Like, oh wow, like this is really good for a Doomkite or something, you know, like very specific situations. But I think in most situations you're just looking for like what's the best DPS one, what's the best heal one, right? It's not that much variety.
Like when the X Pack came out and we got the chest with the different boxes inside with the free relics, I was looking at the support relics, none of which have like healing or DPS mods. They're just like effects that happen when you do something. And I was like, oh, these are cool, but I'll never use them. And I was thinking, I'm like, wouldn't it have just been better if these were the only relics that existed? Just the ones in the support box, or ones like the ones in the support box that like, they just have some random unique effect that doesn't necessarily increase your DPS and doesn't necessarily like, you know, push out more healing. Like they just, you know, give an AoE boon when you do X. Or, you know, like, you know, get a little shield that absorbs damage. Like that stuff is cool, and that's sort of what it should have been, because then if there was nothing that gave you a DPS increase, then you could actually like pick whichever one of those you thought was coolest. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea, or a good point, you know, having the relics being kind of weird and wacky, just kind of crazy effects that you add to your build. I think that would probably make players have more fun with them, and it would probably, in a lot of ways, make them more interesting, because you'd have a lot more freedom, right? Like, oh yeah, I can take this weird effect, and it helps on this particular fight in a small way, but kind of a cool way, right? Like, oh yeah, it does something that's somewhat impactful. Whereas a lot of relics, they don't feel very impactful, right? And I think that is a slight failure of the system, because I think the system was supposed to be like, oh, you know, this is important, right? Like this is actually, you know, a relevant thing that's in my build, and I'm aware of it, and I'm playing around it, right? But you kind of don't really do that much, like with the way a lot of the relics go, in my opinion. You just it just
wonder
happens.
if like the Thief relic and maybe Firework to a lesser extent were added late because they were worried of feedback of people that are like, "Where's my damage?" And people were like, they were like worried that people would get mad, that they would receive negative feedback for not having a DPS relic. Yeah. I would like to know, but they'll never say.
Think so. Like, I think they almost could have just like done it in such a boring way, where like they were all just like DPS and like stat increases. I'm kind of glad that there's all these wacky ones. I don't know. I think it's more that they probably just also looked at like a lot of the existing runes, right? I think a lot of the effects were sort of inspired by those.
Yeah.
I just know that I miss my birds from my, what was it, like the pirate runes?
The pirate or the privateer relic, yeah.
Yeah, I want my bird back.
Well, I genuinely think that like we're gonna get relics with every patch, right?
Yeah.
And then we're probably gonna get relics with every expansion from now on. You know, like I don't think the system's done with the last Soda patch. I think we're gonna continue to get relics forever. Everything's gonna come back. All of that stuff that we lost will eventually come back.
Oh yeah, yeah. They'll probably re-implement most of them in some form or another, and then yeah. And I think a lot of the ones that are going to come out with the expansion and probably future expansions are going to be a little bit weirder. Yeah, they talked about this, right? Where yeah, the core ones, they're pretty basic, you know, they're pretty standard stuff. But the expansion ones, they unleash some bizarre effects for you to go and grab and collect.
They should have pushed the expansion ones a little bit better too. Like, it sucks that what's the one that people were hoping was good for power builds, like the Relic of Karis, where like it makes the eye above your head. Yeah. Like, why isn't that better than Thief? That should be better than Thief. Like, they should have, you know, pushed it a little bit so that it's better than a 5% damage increase. That would have been fucking cool.
Yeah, the eye. And you can, you know, you got to think when you're going to use it, right? You got to save the eyeball for when, you know, it's going to deliver some value to you, I guess.
Yeah, eyeball.
Yeah.
Right. So you could have like the flat damage increase, but then you can have the ones that you kind of have to play around, and if you pull it off, those are better. Those are more of a damage increase, right? But you gotta like, that would be cool. Yeah.
It'd be funny, you know, like the boss goes into a burn phase, you just drop 10 eyeballs, and you just zap it and destroy it immediately.
Yeah. To go back to the balance patch a little bit, there was some kind of insane discourse. And the discourse was insane starting with before the balance patch, like with Soto. Like, people were like mad about the power creep. I'm like, have you guys ever played an MMO before? Is this like brand new to you that there's power creep with an expansion? Every MMO that's ever existed ever has had power creep with the expansions. That's just how it works. New classes, new skills, all this shit's a power creep. That's how gaming works. And if you like are upset about that, then you're self-exposing as like someone who just has no clue what's going on. And then the flip side was when the nerfs came out, people were mad about the nerfs. Like, the people that were like completely the flip side of the coin is that if there's power creep, there's going to be a nerf patch, and the people are like upset about that. So I just don't get the people's expectations. And I'm sure this is different groups of people. It wasn't the same person like complaining about power creep then complaining about nerfs, but it's just interesting to see like the reaction, like swinging each way, because the people just have no sort of centering philosophy about like game balance to stick to.
I think these groups of players want very different things out of the game. And that's where you run into some problems. This is the nature of MMOs, right? You have a very diverse range of players, a very diverse range of interests. And balance matters more or less in different contexts. Like, realistically, in open world, most players are going to be happy with power creep, right? Because seeing a bigger number is fun. You're blasting, right? You can be stronger, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of in contrast to players who maybe are into raids or fractals, where power creep can kind of disintegrate the experience. And you know, I think a lot of people would say it already has to an extent, where bosses essentially become weaker, right? And easier and less engaging over time because of that. And obviously, you know, in PvP and world versus world, you know, power creep can be a pretty serious issue if everyone's getting one shot, or if, you know, like, you're getting 10 condies from one skill hitting you at the same time. Or, you know, maybe a skull grinder applies 10 stacks of confusion to you with Relic of Akeem, and you know you just die. These are all things that can happen. So I think it's just like a case of like what do players actually want out of the game. And I think there's maybe a little bit of a lack of empathy, maybe between both of these groups even, actually, like not necessarily a one-way street. I think a lot of players who like power creep and like power don't really understand why some people wouldn't like power creep. I think there's vice versa as well. I can certainly go like, oh man, I can certainly understand how a player would be just upset that their class is going to do less damage. And maybe something's going to be a little bit more difficult for them, in the next patch, right? Like, look, it's important to actually think about this. There are actually some players who were enabled to do stuff like raids and strike missions by everything being insanely overpowered. And now that it's been nerfed, they actually might be locked out. This actually happened a long time ago. I don't know if everyone recalls this, but you all remember Chaos Chrono, right? Like this build back in Path of Fire. When that build got nerfed, the raid population notably dropped. It actually dropped off hard the week after that patch came through. Why? Well, it's because this build was so overpowered that it essentially enabled a lot of players. It made raids very accessible because the content was essentially way easier because an incredibly overpowered build made all of the content significantly easier. So, I think we should actually kind of consider that, yeah, some players actually might end up running into difficulties when things get nerfed. If they get, especially if it's a fairly significant nerf, like a lot of the builds that happened here. It's not, to be fair, this patch was not as drastic as the Chaos Chrono patch, let's be honest. And to be frank, you know what's actually crazy? Chaos Chrono wouldn't even be a particularly good build if it existed now. That's how high the power level is right now, by the way. Is that true? That actually might not be true. That build,
pretty good. It would skew the meta towards builds that got a damage buff per boon, because you keep 12 boons up constantly.
Yeah.
So that would make things like, I don't know, whatever classes still have damage per boon would be doing slightly better.
Yeah.
I think it just always like feels bad when it's like your build's getting nerfed. It's like now I do less damage than before. But I think sometimes maybe it's difficult to see nerfs in perspective. Does that make sense? Like people just like go and read the patch notes, and like when I read the patch notes, I can't tell if it's a big nerf. And I play this game quite a lot, right? I think the average player, like me, we just kind of look and we're like, yeah, it looks like a nerf, but we don't really know how big the nerf is, right? I think you need an extreme understanding of the game to really be able to see nerfs like in perspective and like know how big or how small they are.
Yeah, I think the average like casual player sees an auto attack going from 1.1 coefficient to 0.9 coefficient, and they don't know necessarily what to make of that.
Yeah, I don't know what to make.
What does that do for my damage? What does that mean for my damage? Like that's
what I've been telling people, like that I've been talking to, is just like, yo, like even though a lot of our builds just got nerfed, we're still doing more damage than like 3 months ago. You know what I mean? Like I think that's the thing that's hard to see in perspective, right? Like it's like, oh, I just got nerfed. Oh my gosh, that feels bad. But we were like, a lot of us were still clearing this content a little while back. You're totally correct though, TeaTime, that like sometimes these OP builds kind of enable content. Actually, I think like in particular Silent Surf Challenge mode got a lot harder because of the Scourge nerf. Because everybody was just like stacking like the Condi Scourge.
To be fair, it's actually possible this patch though, so that's the good news.
That's true. That's true.
That's a good start.
But yeah, I think it's just I think it's easy to sort of like overreact to nerfs. I know I do sometimes, like when I see like, oh gosh, these are skills that I use a lot. But then often when you go into the game and you really try it out, it's like, oh well, I still do crazy damage, right? Like for example, Scourge was like benching almost 50k before.
Good build.
And now it's back to 40k, so that feels huge. It's like, oh my gosh, that's like a 20% damage nerf. But 40k is still ridiculous and still like will melt any raid boss in like mere seconds, you know what I mean? So I think that's sometimes important to keep in mind when it comes to these. Just the perspective, right? Even though we got nerfed, we're still the
busted.
Power creep in the game is still busted. Yeah, like Scourge is still busted, even though it got nerfed for 20%.
ArenaNet would never do this. They would never do what I'm about to say. But I'm just thinking, would it actually be useful? Like ArenaNet know about DPS numbers, and they obviously do internal testing, right? Like, the nerfs were very clearly calculated. If you look at where the benchmarks are, ArenaNet very clearly knew exactly what those changes are going to do. That's an unpopular opinion, by the way. I think people like to go, "Oh yeah, ArenaNet are totally clueless." They're really not.
Yeah, they're not. No.
They know about the numbers. They know about the DPS. I'm really curious if ArenaNet should just give more context and say, "Yeah, this build is going to benchmark at about 41k now." Because they know that. ArenaNet know that number, 100%.
Yeah, I think that their only fear with that is just looking dumb if people figure out a new rotation that makes them look wrong.
I wonder if they have like some tool, like
They
some
do.
internal
They have-
optimizer.
So the keys has like a very advanced like spreadsheet that like you can plug a rotation into, and it will like sim it and give you like a DPS number. And they I don't know if they. I'm not gonna say anything else, but they have that, and they have a better version of that.
Yes.
I mean,
But
like
you have to put the rotation into it. It doesn't.
Yeah, so
like,
you have to theoretically find the rotation. It won't find you the best possible rotation. You have to find
they're
that,
really good at nerfing the old rotation.
Yeah, but not necessarily a new rotation. That
Yeah,
pops
someone
up.
could figure out a new rotation that counters the nerfs in theory.
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I think it's almost impossible to predict that, right? Like, printing a new rotation to pop up, it's almost
too many moving
it's
parts.
yeah, exactly. You can't even do that, right? Like in one go, it's like almost impossible to pull that off. But I do think you're absolutely right. A lot of these numbers, they're really hard to actually contextualize, right? Like, especially if you only play one build, which realistically that's where most players are at, right? So I think Lara is completely correct here. I think players look at their class getting nerfed and don't realize that everything else is also getting nerfed by about the same amount, right? And they go, well, my class is trash now. Look at all these other ones. They got nerfed by like 5%, but of course that 5% nerf can be very significant, potentially anyway, right? I think the nerf to Virtuoso looked very, very small, but it was relevant, right? Like because of the way that class works, right? It lost like half a second of bleed, right, on Jagged Mind, but of course that adds up because of the way the build actually operates, right? Like it gets a lot of value out of that particular trait. So you lost some DPS there. So I think it is definitely hard to kind of contextualize for players exactly what's going on there. But I also do agree with you, Nike. It's a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because it's very easy to make a mistake, and you're probably not going to be exactly right as well, and then you're gonna look foolish. But which honestly, I actually think is really unfair. Like if ArenaNet went above and beyond and actually tried to communicate these changes a lot better, I feel like they would get a lot of shit for it, even though it would actually be a really nice and high effort thing for ArenaNet to do. And that's probably why it won't happen.
Realistically, like no matter what they do, some people will always shit on it though.
True.
Like
Actually
realistically.
True. Especially warrior mains.
This patch, the biggest shitters have been the ones complaining the most about the nerfs.
I mean,
People
in
that
a
are
way,
totally
like
clueless.
what I like about this patch is not like I'm not happy that someone's damage is lower now, right? I don't care too much about that, but a lot of us were kind of like controlled by what's the best, right? There are some people who are like enlightened and they just play something for fun, right? Those
I don't know
are
about
like better
enlightened is
than
the
we
right
are.
word.
But like a lot of us, we just play like what's the best, right? We're like, oh well, that build is doing 46k. I'm not gonna play this 40k build.
Trash.
A lot of us are in that position where we just look at like what's currently the best one. We're gonna play that one. I kind of like how all these builds, like for example, like Hammer Spellbreaker, like Reaper, all of these builds that weren't bad at all, but they just weren't OP like some of the other ones. They were kind of being forgotten, right? Everybody was just playing Scourge, everybody was playing Soul Beast, everybody was playing Catalyst. Like everybody stopped playing these old builds, but now all these old builds are like competitive. Again, if you're the kind of player that's like, you don't care about like playing the best thing, right? You were already good. You were already good. But if you're the kind of player who's like, I gotta play the best thing, there's a lot of options right now. If you want to be top DPS, there's a lot of builds you can be top DPS on. And that's what
All
I
of
like,
them.
right? A lot of these. Yeah, exactly.
I think you're absolutely right here. And unfortunately, this problem is never going away. Maybe we can reach a few people here on our podcast, but realistically, the biggest determining factor on your performance isn't really the build you play. It's going to be your skill level. I should actually slightly caveat there so people don't misinterpret that. As long as the build you play is actually good. So in other words, you can't be top DPS on Carrion Longbow Soul Beast. That's not going to happen. But you can definitely be top DPS on, say, a Condi Soul Beast, right? 100%. You know, you can be top DPS on, I don't know, something a little bit weird. So, you know, well, weirdly, I was going to say Power Tempest, but actually that build was pretty good. So like, I can't even use that as a particularly good example. But like, think of like a random kind of slightly weird build that you don't see that much. You can be top DPS on it if you play well. 100%. Like, people tend to overestimate how important it is to play the best build, where in reality, playing your build better is way more important than playing the best build. Especially if you know how to kind of play around with your utility skills and kind of get the most out of them and how to help your team, right? As opposed to being like a very one-dimensional, like, you know, me DPS Ooga Booga player. That's where you really end up losing a lot of your value there as well. But yeah, that's a problem that's almost insoluble, because to come to that conclusion, to reach enlightenment, as Lara put it, you actually have to have a huge amount of knowledge about the game, right? And this is not a Guild Wars 2 issue, by the way. This is 100% the issue in every MMO, by the way, and probably every game, actually, is that people really overestimate how important it is to pick the best build, or, you know, how much better, people overestimate how much better the best build is compared to, like, a pretty damn good build. The gap there is very, very small. The reason why that gap can sometimes appear very, very big is that when you look at high-level play, everyone's running the very, very best build. But the thing is, of course, and the nuance there that's important to understand, is that at the very top, that, like, 5% difference, 5 to 10% difference, that becomes everything, right? When you're squeezing out that last, you know, 2 seconds, 10 seconds on a boss kill, right? Or you're competing against the best players in the world in PvP, right? Or something like that. That's when a small difference becomes a huge difference, with all this kind of stuff. Like, a really good example of this is actually Thief in PvP, I would say. There was a very long period of time, not right, honestly, kind of right now, but certainly in EOD, where high-level PvP was unwinnable without Thief. As in, like, if you don't have a Thief, you are screwed. You cannot win. It is over. But, of course, in ranked and in low-level competition, so just daily ATs, right, that kind of stuff, honestly, if you didn't have a Thief, who cares, right? Like, you can get it done, right? And this is kind of what I'm talking about here, is that something can be, you are dead if you don't have this at a very, very high level, but at the end of the day, it can be, it's not as impactful when, you know, when you're playing in a normal context, right, where it's not maximally try hard. But yeah, that's it. That's my statement on the meta. Enjoy.
Good.
And again, it's acceptance phase. You have to, you know, there's ways to enjoy power creep eras, and there's ways to enjoy nerf eras. Yeah. You just have to be able to, you know, find the happiness in no matter what the circumstances are. Yeah. You can't get hung up on stuff that you can't control. Yeah, and I think the question you just got to say is the game fun to play? Right, because if I'm gonna talk about power creep, I'm not a huge fan of power creep, but, you know, it does kind of make the game less interesting to me. And I do think there is something lost as well. I think very notably is HTCM. HTCM is a great fight, really fun to progress. Right? It's a great progression experience in Guild Wars 2, but it's actually a lot easier than it was on launch because of power creep. And I'm not like, oh, look at all these noobs, they're getting it so much easier. I don't care about that. I care about the fact that a lot of new players who will start progression are kind of missing out in a way, because they're not playing the version of the fight, the original version of the fight. And of course, you know, maybe there's guides, there's like better techniques, better strategies, so it's always going to be a little bit dissolved, right? Like the integrity of encounters always gets dissolved over time. That's just an inevitability of knowledge and learning, right? But I do feel like, you know, there is something that has been lost when things get overpowered. But that aside, you just have to ask, is the game still fun to play,
right? And to be honest, yeah, it's kind of fun to play. Even though stuff does kind of fall over a bit. In a way, that's kind of fun. You have to shift your mindset. You got to go, look at this boss. It died in 2 seconds. Let's go.
You have to turn into a flex.
Right.
You have to flex.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
You just got to
I think there's
reframe
an
it.
upside to it too, though, right? Like, we're talking about the downsides, and I agree. It is kind of sad seeing these raid bosses fall over in 2 seconds, but I do think the upside is that a lot of people are getting into this content because of the power creep. You know, like when Veil Guardian was like actually like hard when it came out, there's way more people like down to try raids now because it's gotten so much easier. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should power creep the game because of that, but there's some upsides to it as well, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's not all bad, for sure. You know, I don't think it's, you know, and power creep also has a tendency to just to free the game up a little bit, in theory anyway. You just do whatever you want, pretty much. Do whatever you want and blast. No problem.
It is nice that the DPS classes at the top are all sort of in the same range, because I know with like my group's raid static, no one polices what DPS build the DPS players run. It's like, oh, you're playing Thief for this? Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, you're going to play NG for this boss? Okay, whatever. And it's not like because you're playing this particular profession, you're now at the bottom of the chart. Like, everyone can still compete, and there's something great about that.
Yes.
It's so
Indeed.
much better than anyone remember the era in Heart of Thorns where like Necro was just like considered to be like kind of terrible, and like people would like flame you just if you joined as a Necro. It's
I mean,
we've
there was a
come
time
long
where the
way from
only
that.
DPS build was Tempest.
The
Yeah.
Every
only
other DPS build was trash.
Yeah.
Every other DPS build was
True.
trash.
Yeah, and there was also only one healer and one quickness and alacrity provider. Yeah, like I always kind of have a little bit of a ha 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 chuckle whenever anyone says, "Oh, I wish we could go back to the HOT meta." No, you don't. You don't want that. Every single group was 2 druids, 2 warriors, 2 chronos, 4 tempests. That was the easily by far, not even close, the most ultimate god comp that existed. So yeah. Enjoy that. That was good, you know. That was some big damage. Yeah, you were a lightning wizard. That was fresh air staff Tempest, which, to be fair, was a pretty fun build to play actually. As long as you didn't mind conjures.
I miss it.
Yeah.
My Ellie main's heart is still suffering.
What's funny is like that
back.
build would be considered like almost like a low intensity build in today's day and age.
Yeah,
like,
it was very slow paced. Yeah, it was very chill.
Like the APM of that build compared to like say current Weaver, like Weave Self Weaver or Catalyst or you know, basically any of the modern DPS builds. Like the closest thing would be like to Fresh Air Staff would be like current Hammer Spellbreaker, which is crazy.
Yeah, this is another. This is linked to power creep, and it tends to happen at the same time. But one thing that does happen with games is they get faster over time, which I think that is something that we can almost say really is quite bad overall, because I think it makes the game way harder for new players to pick up and play.
The skill ceiling is just
easily.
That much higher from the start. They're looking up way higher.
Yeah, and yeah, the speed of the game has increased a lot. There's a lot more button pressing. Like, you use like every skill basically off cooldown when you rotate through. And of course, you don't have to do that, you know. And in fact, what you'll actually find is that most of your DPS comes from like 5 of your skills, and then the others are just like little itty bitty DPS increases that, you know, take you even higher and higher and higher after that. But yeah, it does happen that the game gets faster over time, and that it's a bit of an unfortunate one. But on the other hand, I actually think that, funnily enough, that's one of the only reasons why a lot of veteran players are less annoyed about power creep. It's because the skill ceiling goes up, right? Like, there's more buttons, so you can play better. So even though the game is easier, like, in some sense, it got harder, right? Because there's more buttons to press. You know, it kind of balances out almost.
I think we mentioned that in previous TeaTimes that as long as the skill floor and the skill ceiling go up at the same time, it's kind of a win-win for the community as a whole. Like if you make it so that, you know, like the solar era where he was raising the floor, but he didn't raise the ceiling, people were like, "Oh, this sucks." But if you raise the floor and raise the ceiling, people can kind of live with it because everyone can have their fun in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be
Nice to
careful
have
with it.
those like simple builds, you know? Like it just makes it so much easier for people to get started. I do actually agree though. You know, bosses die way faster now with all the power creep, but it's still fun to try to push yourself, right? Something I always like to do is like take a look at my own DPS numbers and then try to push them and stuff. So even though the boss dies faster, there's still that like inherent challenge where you're like trying to like kill it even faster, right? And try to master the build a bit more. There is still that sort of fun to it, I would say.
I need to stop being lazy trash and talk about this on a video because I'm actually going to reveal. I'm gonna reveal a big secret here.
A MightyTeapot exclusive.
Oh, yeah. This is exclusive. Gamers, every build can be low intensity, and I mean all of them. And I'm going to give you the guide on this right now. And by the way, I'm not being facetious. I'm actually being serious. I really hope this is actually useful. Seriously. Take a build, any build. Find your 5 best skills and only press those and fuck the other ones. And you'll actually do really well. To be honest, and I'm serious too.
Sometimes you'll do better.
Yeah, you might even do. You might even do better. You might even do better. Yeah, you might do better. Yeah. And just cycle through those best skills, and make sure you get your auto attacks in, and you know, keep blasting away and get uptime on the boss. And yeah, you'll honestly. No, yeah, you can on Ellie. By the way, funnily enough, yeah. For example, if you were doing this on Condi Ellie, you just go Fire, Earth, and then use the best skills on those 2 achievements. On Power, Fire, Air. Use the both on Weaver, right? And that's actually an Li, yeah. Funnily enough, Weaver is pretty easy to play right now, to be honest. Like Power Weaver, it's pretty damn easy to execute. It's one of the easier rotations in my opinion. But yeah, if you just use those skills, you'll actually kind of pump. That's probably true. Oh, it is. No, it's not probably true. It is true. And you can test this, by the way. If you want to have a go at this, go to the DPS golem and open up Arc DPS when they goddamn gets patched, and do your rotation. Do a rotation. And what you'll notice is that when you mouse over your Arc DPS and you see all the skills, you know, you see a list of all the skills and it gives you how much damage they did, you'll notice that a lot of your damage is coming from a relatively small selection of your abilities, right? So just use those, and then you can skip all the ones that don't really do that much. And seriously, I'm not joking here. And this is something that is what often happens is that when we post like a rotation video, when someone posts a rotation, they show you the best version of it because no shit, right? Obviously they're going to do that. Why would they not do that? But what gets missed out here, or what a lot of people maybe don't understand, is that not every single ability is born equal. Some of those abilities are doing way more damage than the others, right? Like, and like those ones are the ones you really want to focus on. But yeah, every build can be low intensity. Because realistically, when people say low intensity build, what they mean is low intensity rotation. With that, the builds are going to be basically the same, right? Like Berserker gear doesn't become magically bad, right? Like if you use less abilities, or like Harrier gear on a healer, it doesn't just become trash, right? Like if you press less buttons. No, of course not, right? Or Viper gear or whatever, all this kind of stuff. Like it will still work just fine. It's just a case of, you know, figuring out like which are the really good skills to use, which to be fair can be very hard to do without some kind of DPS meter, but you can mouse over the tooltips. They'll actually give you a pretty good idea of, you know, if you see one ability's got a tooltip of 8,000, yeah, that's probably pretty good, right? And if one's only got a tooltip of 1,500, well, you know, that one's probably, maybe don't worry about that one too much, right? But yeah, there you go.
What do they call this again? I think it's like the 80-20 principle. Like 20% of the effort gets you like 80% of the way there. And then like 80% of the effort is like the final 20%, right? I do think that
Definitely
heavily
true.
goes.
Oh, it's very true.
Too.
It's very true. If you're going on the golem to practice your rotation, you will get to 80-90% of the benchmark exceptionally quickly. Almost all of your time is going to be, right, I'm going to push it to 95. I'm going to get to 98.
Yeah.
Like, that's where all of your time is going to be. And that goes for everything, by the way. And funnily enough, it's really cool to actually have this mentality for everything, because this applies to learning a new activity. So if you want to learn raids or PvP or world versus world or strikes, you'll learn like, ooh, I can do this now. I can do this pretty okay, very, very quickly. It's that mastery, like, yeah, I can do every mechanic on this fight perfectly. I can do really good DPS on this fight. I can heal this. I can do every role in this fight. That's where all the hours actually come from.
Yeah.
The actual first step is not going to take you that many hours whatsoever. So it's kind of like a general, kind of useful general principle to have when approaching a variety of tasks, I suppose.
I think quickly we should touch on the fact that there hasn't been ARC DPS this week, and what consequences it has had, both positive and negative.
What do you think? What I mean,
so positively,
yeah,
it does seem like it's emboldening people to join pugs that they probably wouldn't join if they were afraid of being exposed. But the drawback has been there's been some pugs that have been absolute garbage. I had a DPS Bladesworn join my Dagda pug.
Yeah.
Lived the entire fight.
Yep.
All 443 seconds of her 55 million HP.
Holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And he did 804 DPS.
What? 804?
804. Not even a 1K DPS gamer. And
Maybe
I have
he
to
had the
imagine
wrong target the whole
he
time.
stowed his weapon and was just standing there. That's the only way I could possibly imagine that existing. Yeah, so it's been interesting, and people are so I don't know if this is just like always, but I've noticed it just seems like the average DPS player has gotten way worse without the DPS meter. I don't think it's affected the supports so much, but the average DPS player seems to have gotten significantly worse.
You know, the 800 DPS Bladesworn is welcome to join my group anytime, and I'll help you out. Okay, it will be a good time. I'll teach you. No, but the thing for me, so you know, there was a whole discussion about this on Reddit this week. The thing for me is I like to use my arc as a tool for self-improvement. If somebody in my group is not doing a lot of damage, I will never call you out because I'm too awkward to do that. But I like to use Arc because I'm kind of insecure myself. When I like go into a raid, I'm like, am I the dead weight right now? I'm really scared that people will be, you know, will not be happy that I'm there, that people will secretly be judging me in the background. I like Arc just as a confirmation that myself, I'm pulling my own weight, and I really miss it. Like, it makes me feel more insecure when I play, that I can't just look over and be like, yeah, you know, I'm doing
I don't
pretty
know
well.
if I'm any
pretty
good.
good at the game. Yeah, like, I mean, I guess at this point, I think I kind of know how to play. But especially when I was, like, first learning, you know, also as, like, a healer, like, is my boon uptime good, right? Are the people in my group, like, struggling with their quickness right now? That is why I miss Arc. Especially if I join a pug, I will never call you out on any Arc information. I actually hide the DPS meter on my stream because I want people to not feel any like pressure or whatever. I want people who are like 800 DPS Bladesworn to join my group and like try it out for the first time. But I do really miss it for myself.
For Lara. I noticed this watching Emmy's stream, and you said you're going through it yourself. You're doing HTCM Prague with a new group. Not having the DPS meter has to make that significantly harder.
I do agree.
Significantly harder.
I do agree. I do feel like that's a different situation, though. Like, you know, if I'm like in a random pug with random people, I don't care how much damage people are doing. If somebody's doing not a lot, I will like push myself to try to do more. But if I'm in like a group of like a static, right, 10 people, we're all like doing our best to like get through this fight. In that situation, I think it's much more sort of like warranted to like give each other feedback, if that makes sense, right? You're like working towards this goal together. You're doing the hardest fight in the game. It is quite painful there. We just had like our first practice session like on Friday. We have no idea if we're doing good damage. We have no idea if our boons are good. So yeah, it does
And you
hurt,
don't know
especially
why you're
when you get
missing
there.
the damage checks.
Yeah,
Like, you
you don't
can't
know.
say, like, oh, this person is doing 10k below what they should be doing.
Yeah, or maybe
It's
the
hard to
boons or
diagnose
this
your
or that.
problems when you're having a
Exactly.
problem.
Yeah,
I think Arc is like what some people forget is that, you know, a lot of people, they're like, oh, Arc DPS is like this tool for negativity, right? People are like judging each other, but it can be that, but it can also be an amazing tool for like self-improvement and like diagnosing your squads. And I'm not out there diagnosing any pugs, right? I don't care about that. But you know, if you were trying to do HCCM, we're trying to proc the hardest fights in the game. It's
I
it's
don't
a
even
lot
think people
harder.
care on pugs. I don't think
It's
people
a
even
lot
care.
harder.
I join a bunch of pugs.
If they had shame, they would they'd already fix their problems.
If I'm in there, I see people doing like 5k DPS. They don't get kicked. Everyone just kind of blasts and just gets it over with pretty much, and just gets through it. That's just it's not the end of the world. Yeah, I think the worst is if you don't have quickness. Then people are gonna get mad. They're gonna go, wait, where's my quickness? Give it, hand it over. But yeah, if someone's doing like less DPS, I don't think anyone really cares that much, to be honest. Yeah, I think the overwhelming majority of use cases for Arc is that people using it to view their own DPS. To be honest, I don't think people really care about other people's DPS that much. The only time where you should care is if you're in a team. Like if you're in a team and like a static group, there's kind of more of an obligation there, in my opinion, to do your best, especially if it's really hard. Sure, if it's like Veil Guardian, you probably don't need to sweat that hard. But if it's HTCM, yeah, you should actually be, doing your best because that fight is really hard. So, you've got to do everything you can to try and get it down. And of course, if you're in like an actual arranged static team where everyone's working together, it's like a group project, right? We've all been there. You've got a group project, work or school.
Yeah.
And that one asshole just doesn't do anything. It's not fun. Okay, that's not good.
It depends on the situation, I think, right? Like if you're in like you're progging something together, you're trying to kill this really hard fight, everybody's pushing each other, you're working as a team, right? That's important to remember. You're working as a team, right? You want to like improve together. I think that is a much different situation than like, oh, you're killing Veil Guardian with like a couple of guildies or like a random poke or something. Yeah, big difference between those two.
So maybe this
Massive
is controversial,
difference.
but seeing how dependent the community is on Delta Connected to keep Arc maintained,
crazy.
Do you think it's time for ArenaNet to flip the switch and turn on the DPS meter that already exists in the client and is just disabled, and just give us an official DPS meter so that we're not reliant on the generosity of one programmer to do a DPS meter for a game he doesn't play anymore?
The thing is, probably not. The reason for that is because it doesn't have logs. And I actually think logging can be extremely useful, especially for teams who are really looking to improve and get better. I think it would be nice if there was an official option. I actually think it's really useful for players to kind of like, get some feedback on how well they're doing. I think it's really useful stuff. But the problem is that Arc DPS isn't just a DPS meter. It also has loads of analytics and loads of tools that are incredibly useful for a player who's looking to see what's going on, right, and see how see how the group is performing and so on with a lot of these things. So I think you'd probably lose out on a lot. Most notably the logging. I find the logging to be really useful, I think.
Yeah, they would. Maybe they'd have to work with the API guy to have an API so you could output logs through the official API.
Yeah, you would probably want to have some kind of system like that. Like, I mean, you could just. I mean, the thing is that I don't know. Like at this point, you can probably get away with a lot of stuff. I mean, people run add-ons that are pretty questionable with the TOS, and you don't really get banned for
like
it.
Blish.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, yeah, some of the stuff you can do with Blish is crazy. Like, you can actually get you can get a more powerful version of deadly boss mods and weak auras from World of Warcraft in Guild Wars 2. You can run some crazy stuff. There's some really, really powerful add-ons actually that can make raid fights. Hell, you can actually have a timer that calls every single mechanic on HTCM for you. Really powerful. And have like markers and set up there. It will tell you where to go, all this kind of stuff. It's really powerful stuff. that you can have in the game. And yeah, and I don't really care about it. I think they're just like, well, as long as you're not hacking, you're all right. By the way, guys, I should say that some of the stuff is definitely against the TOS, and as an ArenaNet part of the TM, you definitely shouldn't do it. Guild Wars 2 Clarity is another one, right? Guild Wars 2 Clarity is also basically a hack that allows you to customize your boon display and various other procs. It can track your Guardian Torch 4, for example. That is literally what a weak aura does from World of Warcraft. It's very similar. In fact, it's almost certainly inspired by that.
Isn't there a World v World one that like gear checks the enemy Zerg?
Like, wait, is that? That just sounds like a hack. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds like a hack.
It is.
It is.
It's not good.
That isn't good. But yeah, there's definitely some pretty powerful stuff out there. But so the whole like add-on thing is always like really, really interesting actually. Because it's like, it's a really slippery slope, and it's really easy to let it go too far, right, and get out of control. You could definitely argue that some of the stuff in Blish, even though I'm a big Blish fan, I really like it. I think it's really cool, and I think there's some really clever programmers who make stuff for it, and I really like the application. I think it's a really nice piece of programming. Just, as a code project, I appreciate it for what it is. But it definitely is extremely powerful, and it kind of goes under the radar a little bit for now, but maybe that won't last forever, huh, right? But yeah.
I don't want Guild Wars 2 to be a game where add-ons are like mandatory. Yeah. Does that make sense? Because the WoW is kind of in that spot as far as I understand.
I think it's inevitable. If we ever get more HTCM-like content, like picture a future 10 years from now where once a year we get a new HTCM. And so 10 years from now we have 10 HTCMs or stuff that's even harder. It's almost inevitable that there'll be add-ons. Like Blish will almost become or something like that actually does call out the mechanics will be mandatory, because if you have 10 encounters that are that hard, it's going to be hard for people to memorize all of that.
It just depends. It depends on community attitudes as well.
Yeah.
So look, this is the story I always tell. If ArenaNet came out tomorrow and they said, "Hey guys, the next challenge mode is going to be far harder than HTCM, and to celebrate it, we're going to put $100,000 on the team that kills it first." The first thing any team with 2 brain cells would do is find a developer and make an add-on. And by the way, that would have been true for any raid. That would have been true for Wing 7, Wing 6, Wing 5, Wing 4, Wing 3, Wing 2, Wing 1. The first thing anyone with half a brain would do is develop tools that will help you clear it and will essentially allow you to process more information, allow yourself to give yourself more information. So it really depends. Even if add-ons were allowed and they were really powerful, people might not use them because they just want to chill and just blast, right? But if people take it seriously and went really, really hard, you will see add-ons 100%. It's very much like a community attitude, not just what's actually legal. Because right now, the stuff in Guild Wars 2 that's actually legal add-ons-wise is pretty damn powerful, or, well, on the edge of legality is pretty powerful. But people don't use them because people don't really take the game that seriously. I know that sounds harsh, but it's just true. So, people are chilling. But if there was big money on the line or people get really competitive about something, yeah, you will see add-ons in use. 100%.
That's what happens in WoW, right? Like
they have devs. They have devs on standby.
Devs developing the guide add-ons as they do the fight.
Yeah.
This is actually pretty well because I've been playing a little 14 recently, and in 14 add-ons are just against US. It's not allowed. But there keep being these big sort of scandals. So recently they had this new Ultimate fight come out.
There was a camera add-on used, I believe, right? Or
yeah,
something, right?
like there was a team that claims Volt first, and then soon after it was leaked that they had used I think it was a Zoom thing.
Yeah.
Everybody was memeing about it. It's I know I'm kind of scared of it opening Pandora's box though. Because as far as I understand it, in WoW, almost fights are almost balanced around it. Right, because they know people are going to use add-ons, so they just make the fights harder. So that even if you have add-ons, they're hard to execute, like these truly hard as nails fights. I don't want Gotus 2 to be that.
Yeah, it's really tricky. It's really tricky. Like there's definitely some fights in WoW, especially when they're unnerfed. I think actually, do you know what? I think add-ons are actually in some sense less of a problem than the top teams, because the problem in WoW is that they kind of want the fights to not die instantly and fall over immediately. So they have to kind of, especially on the start of a raid release, they have to put it on the edge of impossibility. Otherwise, it will just get flattened. Because there are teams who literally play professionally, right? So, which I think is unique. I think even I think even in 14, people don't play professionally in 14. I think, right? It's not the same. Like the World of Warcraft Race to Worlds First is actually unique in this regard, where people really take it seriously. And of course, people do in other games.
It's close though, but it's not. There's not as much of like an event, right? Yeah. It's more like people stream it. Like it's big on Twitch, kind of. But I do think WoW is much more of a world's first actual event. Like people fly out and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a different environment. And by the way, this is not to say that the 14 players are a bunch of scrubs. They're obviously amazing at the game, right? But there's obviously a big difference when you go from this is literally a business to get worlds first to like we're amazing players and we're blasting, right? These are not the same things.
It's like an esport, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like an esport essentially.
Yeah. So like that's definitely an issue. But yeah, there definitely is some problems with that in WoW. But they've kind of pulled back on it. So even Blizzard agree with that, right? But yeah, you certainly have to be careful. Otherwise, it turns into an absolute add-on fiesta. I think it's less of an issue with Guild Wars 2. The thing about WoW is that it's a little bit more of a spreadsheet adjacent game than Guild Wars 2, to be honest, right? Like, that's just kind of the way WoW works. It is a little bit of you got to look at all the numbers, right? You got to pump really hard, right? You just got to get bigger numbers and bigger numbers. That's the way the game kind of works. But yeah, for sure. You don't want to let it get out of hand. You don't have to be a total clown fiesta, but I think you can draw a line pretty easily. Like, maybe DPS meters are allowed. That's how it is.
To come back to what you were talking about, though, I don't think ArenaNet will ever add an official DPS meter.
Nope.
I don't think they...
See, I don't know. I don't know.
Like, the shitstorm would be too big.
I think
because
that
now
they were close to having it.
Here's the thing. Like, I think you can... Like I said, I think you can use a DPS meter in, like, a way where it's, like, self-improvement, team improvement, right? I do think there's people out there that use DPS meters to be mean. 100% those people are out there, and usually I think the kind of person that complains about someone else's DPS isn't usually even that good themselves. If they were truly good, they'd step up their game and carry. But like there is sort of like toxicity with DPS meters, and right now we're in this situation where it's like, oh yeah, it's a third-party add-on. If ArenaNet doesn't themselves, then suddenly it's like, oh, this toxicity is happening because of ArenaNet's thing. So I don't think they ever want to like open that Pandora's box and like touch it.
You know what though? I think this thing around DPS meters and toxicity, I think people really miss that. They see what's happening now, but they don't think about what would be happening if it didn't exist. Do people really believe that if there was no DPS meters, everyone were like, oh, we're never going to kick anyone now for a stupid reason? Oh, no. In fact, I would argue the opposite is the case. If you don't have a DPS meter, you get kicked for a genuinely brain-dead reason. At least if you get kicked for doing 3k DPS, there's actually a reason, right? And you can actually get some feedback from it, or maybe you might just get kicked.
Chances are,
right? But if
the
there's
no, just fall apart.
Yeah, quickly. If there's no meter, the group would just disband, or people would rage quit, or you just randomly get kicked. Like this is the thing people always miss about Gear Check and Arc is that Arc and Gear Check, I'm just gonna say this, it makes it less toxic.
Because if you're like, oh, look, we have 8 good people and 2 people that are holding us back, like, severely, well, you can just get rid of those 2 people and replace them and move on. Whereas otherwise, without a DPS meter, you'd just be like, this group is just hopelessly flawed and will never get the kill. Let's just disband. Because 2 people were holding you back. Which, I mean, in theory, you can 8-man every boss, so that's not necessarily true, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but you have just no idea, what's going on.
Yeah, you can't diagnose the problem.
Yeah, and that leads to more toxicity, not less. It's weird.
Personally?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, for me personally, the thing about the meter, the reason I like the meter, is because like if Arc didn't exist, I don't think I would be confident joining raid books. Personally, Like, because again, like Arc to me sort of confirms like, hey, I actually do know what I'm doing, right? Like,
Get toxic, Lara.
like
Start
when
flaming.
raids were first, when raids
Lara
first came
likes the
out,
meter.
no, but generally I didn't do raids. I was like scared. I was like, this content is way too hard for me, right? To me personally, again, just that information to myself is really what like sort of gives me the confidence to like be like, yeah, I can join this puck, right? I can do this. I can do Arv's Temple CM. I think if the meter didn't exist, I think a lot of people like me would just be like too unconfident to do content because we just assume that we were bad in a way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
That was a very weird tangent. I think it's time to move on from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a bit weird, but you know what? It's tea time. It's always going to get weird. Next is actually something that I really wanted to talk about, and now we have arrived. World versus world. I think actually I'm going to open it up with this. Bit of a communication whoopsie from ArenaNet. So basically ArenaNet have now said that World vs. World Alliances are kind of going to be delayed a fair, but they were supposed to be kind of like a beta coming out this year. But they're refocusing on world restructuring. And this kind of got a pretty negative reaction. I think it kind of made people doom a little bit, but I don't think people should doom about it at all, because I'll tell you all a little secret here. You're getting a lot of secrets today. World restructuring is easily the most interesting part of the entire Alliances thing. It's just that ArenaNet framed it really negatively, so it sounded really bad in their blog post. But basically, the world restructuring is the bulk of the World vs. World rework. That means you sign up with your guild, and your whole guild gets splattered into a matchmaker that kind of looks at player activity and what people like to do. Like, are they killing players? Are they capping stuff? It splats them into a matchmaker, makes these worlds, and then boom, you have like a matchmaking system that hopefully makes some balanced matches and really active matchups. That's what world restructuring is. Alliances is literally just you can attach multiple guilds together and be a blob within a world, right? That is basically the difference between these two things. And as you can tell there, the world restructuring is not only the bulk of it, it's also by far the most impactful part of it to the World vs. World experience, especially for players who don't play, because it means you won't have to transfer. You just, boom, guild, you're in, go. Play with your guild, blast. And I do feel for ArenaNet here, because they were trying to be really honest and transparent and say, like, hey guys, yeah, you know, we're not going to do alliances for a little bit, but the framing of it just didn't really connect, and it came over very negative.
Think the general public thinks alliances is what you mean by world restructuring.
Yeah, exactly.
When they hear alliances, they think, oh, that's playing with my guild instead of the server. But that's actually the opposite is true.
Yeah.
I think if they would have sent out a blog post and it would have been like, good news, everyone. World restructuring, playing with your guild, is coming this year.
Yeah.
Alliances is still coming, but it's a couple months after. I think everybody would have been like, hell yeah. Like, everybody would have been hyped. Like, I don't know. I do think that's, again, I'm not a World Field main, just to like phrase that. But I think for most people, playing with their guild is the important part, right? The thing about these alliances, again, alliances is like guilds being able to team up with each other. They've mentioned that even with alliances, there's still a cap of 500 players. So if you really want to play with a certain group of 500 players with multiple guilds, you could technically just like make an alliance guild. It doesn't add that much to the whole system. It'll be sort of cool to have like this banner, right? Like guilds can team up with each other. But even if alliances isn't out, you can still kind of do that. You can still make an alliance guild and get all those people in there, and it's effectively the same thing. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they were trying to be really honest and trying to communicate well. But I think a lot of players just read it and they saw alliances delayed.
It's over.
Oh my gosh, again. You know, I think alliances already has this bad rep because, you know, I'm sure we all know, but alliances got announced in like 2017 or something. You know, and then it got quietly cancelled and now it's back. And I think those of us who like have paid a little bit of attention, we know that Alliances hasn't been in development all that time, right? They only restarted development in like 2021 or something. But I think most average Guild Wars 2 player, they just hear Alliances it's never coming, right?
It's over.
2017.
Dead game.
Yeah, I actually think I agree. I think the news is not that bad. It's basically the guild teaming up part that's delayed, but the major rework, they didn't give us a date though. They should have given us like a vague idea, I feel. But that sounds like it's still on track to come out sometime soon-ish, hopefully. But yeah, just most players just hear Alliance is delayed, and then they think like, wait, it's been since 2017. It's never coming, right? The framing is just really
Yeah, the only reason that you would want alliances is if you like play on EU and you want like some Brazilians to be your night capping team, but you don't actually want to be in the guild with the Brazilians. So you like ally with their Brazilian guild so that you're nice and sequestered from a Squadron Listo stuff.
Yeah. I think the only thing that you could, the only other thing that's like, okay, it's a bit unfortunate, is that the competitive infrastructure isn't going to be coming, right? It's just going to be the matchmaker and stuff. And I think definitely something that is going to be really cool about alliances is that it's going to be like we don't even know what they're going to do here. So I'm kind of actually doing the wrong thing here. In the wise words of Nike, do not expect anything more or anything less than what ArenaNet say. You should take them exactly at their word. Do not expect anything more. I think what's really cool about alliances is that there's probably going to be maybe like a season system or a leaderboard of some kind, like kind of giving some context to why you would kind of care about winning in World versus World. That would be really fun. But from a gameplay perspective, a lot of the improvements, in fact, all of the improvements from a gameplay perspective are essentially going to be with world restructuring rather than with alliances.
There's no way that's coming soon.
No.
There's no way, right? Like you said, don't expect more than they've mentioned.
It's entirely possible that they are... what I kind of got from that, and again, maybe this was just the way it was framed in the blog post, is that maybe they're kind of thinking, is this really a good idea to do this? I was kind of getting that they were getting a little bit of cold feet about the whole alliances thing, and thinking more that world restructuring might be the better way to go. But... I don't know, they seem to be continuously improving World vs. World. They added, like, insanely cheap gear from World vs. World, which is kind of cool, right? Yeah. With the latest patch. It's actually crazy.
That's so good, actually. Yeah.
This is a completely...
I think that's so great for the game. Just letting people try out new builds, get exotic gear, like, quickly, get some people into World vs. World. That is the best change in that whole patch. I really like it.
A complete tangent here, but the economy of Guild Wars 2 is doing really well. And
it's really good.
It's really good, and it's the Wizard's Vault, by the way. It's completely the Wizard Vault, and I think notably the legendary thing, right? The legendary thing, the starter kit. I think it's got loads of people making legendaries and participating in the economy, and that just means that so many tier 6 materials are getting like sucked up. Same with Ectos, right? And also really clever. I don't know who they've got doing the economy, but they're clever because they made Lear basically in the Wizard's Tower. You can get all the like loads of materials and stuff. From him, but you pay an ecto tax on all of them. So ectos have gone massively up as a result of that. So some really clever, really clever
Isn't it also
economy
because of the? I think it's also because of the motivations, isn't that? Like
yeah,
for
true.
The rifts,
Yeah, for legendary armor.
Ectos?
Yep. You need that for the motivations. That's also hugely, and a lot of that stuff goes account bound, right? Like you're basically putting in materials and you get these essences out. You get like account bound essences out. So that's exactly what's going on there as well with legendary armor. And that's, of course, that's going to go even harder when it actually drops. Right now, it's basically people like prepping for it, essentially. There's not too much you can do with that stuff right now, but of course, eventually you will be able to. And that's going to be big. It's going to be huge. It's going to be colossal. Yeah, that's a completely random tangent away from World versus World.
I have a good tangent.
Okay, what is it?
That is related to Wolves versus Wolves.
Do it.
Weekly events. Wolves v. Wolves Rush this week. Have any of you seen the queues? Like, I guess it depends on what server you're on, but the queues in Wolves v. Wolves this week were like massive. Like they're doing this. They started doing these like sort of weekly events almost, or it seems to be every couple weeks. Like we just had Fractal Rush, we just had Wolves v. Wolves Rush. The rewards aren't actually even that good. The rewards are like pretty mediocre, but somehow if you just like add a tiny little bit of rewards, everybody gets interested.
A
It's
little
wild.
FOMO also doesn't
You
hurt.
just put like a very tiny reward and people will eat it up. And everybody goes to fractals, everybody goes to Wolffield. I really like it. I do know that there's some Wolffield mains who weren't happy this week because they couldn't get into the maps because all of us PvE players, we were all suddenly playing Wolffield this week, so there were huge queues. But I really like it. Just them having like these little events that they're doing. They also had like some Scrit events where you go talk to a Scrit and then you get some stuff. I think it's good to keep people engaged, right? We know that there's a big patch coming like roughly a month from now with new content, a new map, and new features and all that sort of stuff. But it's nice to have these sort of like tiny events in between. Keep people logging in, give them sort of a sense of direction. Like, yo, this week you're doing fractals, this week you're doing World for World. It's cool. Really been enjoying this.
Yeah. No, I'm actually a huge fan of the weekly events, and it looks like they're trying to make them automated as well. So they're just going to cycle around all over the place. I think it's really good, because it's very reminiscent of the Season of the Dragons, right? Like, even though it doesn't really add new content to the game, it makes the game feel alive and exciting. And if they can actually have that automated, it just continuously cycles around. I think it's going to be really good for the game. You know, a lot of new players are going to be trying World vs. World right now. If they do it for PvP, a lot of new players will try it. You know, they could do something like a strike week as well. I think a lot of players would go ahead and have a go at that as well. I think it'd be really fantastic for the overall health of the game, I think, if they, they kind of make this happen. Raids, maybe not raids, maybe
didn't they data mine what's on the rotation already? Like, isn't
it's gonna be dungeons? We know dungeons coming.
Yeah.
Dungeon gaming
Can go back to the original end game, selling a raw.
Yes,
I can't wait.
Selling a raw for the weekly. And it's big because you can solo it, right? So you can sell it to
solo
4
it
people.
To the end and then sell 4 spots.
4
Easy.
spots. That's big. It's huge. That's what we like to see.
Let's run it back.
Yeah.
I think this is actually big in Guild Wars 1, isn't it? Like, Guild Wars 1 is in complete maintenance mode, right? It doesn't really get new content. But they still have these automated, like, bonus weekends.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this week you can get more Lightbringer faction or whatever. Like, I actually do think that's... It'll be really cool to have this on an automated thing. Just keep it going.
Yeah, I agree. The more of that kind of stuff, the better. The rewards are mediocre, as you said, which is a little bit sad. But hey, I guess they were pretty OP last time, to be fair. Especially the Fractal Rush, right? You could just get so many of those little boxes, right, and just go crazy. I did like the fact that they released Fractal Rush when all 3 CMs, 3 CMs were severely broken, and 1 was a little bit broken as well. That was good content. They did mostly fix those now.
They fixed them now.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Mostly.
The way they fix it is absolutely fascinating. They changed the way the bosses work. I don't think they could actually fix the core issues, so they kind of band-aided it a little bit. But yeah, it mostly doesn't break anymore. Which is
doesn't the boss go like invulnerable or something? So that like
you can't. I keep the just goes invuln at the start, so you can't bug her. You can't hit her because if you and they changed the way Artsarov works as well. Second boss on Chat Observatory. Basically, she just delays her moves a bit, so it doesn't bug pretty much.
I wonder how it even goes bugged. Like it got bugged with Soda, right? There must be some like complicated AI thing that they changed. Like just suddenly these unrelated fractal CMs break. It's very strange to me. Oh well.
Yeah, it's
spaghetti code.
It is a little bit of spaghetti code there, that's for sure. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. But yeah, weekly events. I do like those. I also, they keep adding these little weird things in. I'm not sure if people are totally enamored by this, but I like, finding the Scrit about the place. Like the Black Lion, like Scrit hunt thing you got to go around. I think something like that's actually pretty interesting.
I didn't get involved in that. I probably should have done it, but...
It's pretty good. The rewards for that are good, actually. Yeah. They're really good. Yeah, and you just have to go around to various places and find all the Scrits. I like it. It's pretty big energy, to be honest. I enjoy that.
So, there were these different scripts you had to go find. Some of them were like at the end of jumping puzzles.
Yes.
So I've heard that there's people that have been like teleporting, right? Like the portals porting people to the end.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that there's people who made like genuinely 1,000 gold in like a week just by portaling people.
Ooh,
to
that's
the script.
big.
Yeah,
We've got some business going on there.
Making
I like it.
Portaling people to the script.
Yes, very nice. Actually, yeah, that sounds fun. Actually, I've got to get in on that. Some big corporate right there. Tips welcome. Tips mandatory. Okay.
That's why
That's what you
when
gotta
people
do.
want tips, you send them like the Aether Path key, like pieces.
Do people
Thank
tip?
you,
Do people
appreciate
tip
that.
more on US servers? Because we don't do that here in the
I
UK.
don't tip for jumping puzzles.
Yeah, we don't do
No.
tipping here, guys. Okay, it's not.
Do.
Yeah.
It's like we don't tip commanders or something, but portals. We always tip the portals. That's good. Actually, yesterday we had the C major in-game concerts, and we have like one big concert each year. So it was like our big yearly anniversary concerts, and we got like over 1,000 golden tips.
big.
So yeah,
See,
you
that's
just gotta
more
become
busking.
a musician.
Yeah, you're
That's how
yeah,
you
that's
go.
yeah,
You're
that's
busking.
it. Oh man, that's good. I like that. I think stuff like that's actually really interesting. That's kind of why I like the weekly events, is because I think it provides kind of emergent content. It kind of gets people interacting with each other a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
It makes it quite a social experience, I think, which I really enjoyed. It, you know, it's weird because again, to bring up Season of the Dragons again, nothing happened. And actually, if you think about it from an objective standpoint, that period of the game's history was some of the darkest days of the game. Like, everyone was kind of thinking, or, well, the studio was surprisingly close to getting axed by NCSoft pretty much, right? After the Icebrood Saga fiesta, all that kind of stuff. It was terrible. There was no content, right? Icebrood Saga was insanely scuffed, and there was an expansion like a year later. It was brutal, right? But it was still really fun. It was actually, but the thing is, it wasn't actually the darkest days of the game. It was actually kind of exciting because it was like, oh man, there's a new thing. We're going back. We're playing through all the old content. We're getting a legendary trinket. This is so cool. We're getting the precursor for the next expansion. So I think they're trying to capture that, and I think it will work. It's very cool, especially when they combine that with the Rift system. I'm not a huge fan of Rifts right now because I view the system as very underdeveloped. But with any luck, when they add convergences and when they add like higher tier rifts, they could be really interesting, I think, because that also has this aspect of like, oh, the rifts are really good in this map now because of the map rotations. Oh, they're really good here. They're really good here. They're really good here.
Yeah, when there's like T6 blood in Cursed Shore on the rotation, and you're like getting like a T6 blood every rift, like your gold per hour is mega. That's really good.
When it lines up with the baubles, that's also like really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
good.
do enjoy a bauble farm, especially if you can make people mad while you're doing it.
Oh, you mean by killing the mobs so quickly so people can't tag them? Yeah.
Yeah, Jester and I killing the mobs as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So that people kick us out of the squad, but they can't kick us out of the map.
Yeah. Do you do that in the labyrinth as well? Do you just go in there and...
I've never been in the labyrinth, and I will never go.
Fanggold.
But I would do that.
Fanggold.
If I went into the labyrinth, I would do that.
Yo, I am so excited, by the way, for the jumping puzzle to come back. Last year, I did the clock tower backwards.
Backwards, yes.
Yeah, and like I've been trying to think of a new one this year. I kind of want to do connect. I want to do like connect, where like if you like move like this, it turns your camera.
Oh
and
yeah,
then if you jump, the character jumps. I'm so excited.
Dance pad clock tower. Let's
I
go.
feel like dance pad is like. I think that's already been done. Didn't
Really?
like Duality do that? I think Duality.
Not the
did
jumping
that.
puzzle, surely not.
No, I think that has happened. I think that has already happened.
You're too slow if you walk the whole way, right? There's no way you can make it. I was thinking you could do like walking. No. Nah, there's no way you'd make it though. What are some other good challenges you could do? Is it?
Oh, I've been thinking of voice commands.
Oh,
as well.
I could think of
That's
one.
a good one.
Every time you fail a jump, you take a shot of vodka.
I ain't doing that one.
Yeah. It'll just get crazy.
Yeah. Not sure about that one. I guess
Maybe not.
Yeah, there's
Maybe
not
not.
much you can do because you can't. You can only jump. I was gonna say maybe you could do it while playing a musical instrument. You could do it. You got to play a song at the same time as you can, but you can't use it, can you? You know you can't do it. So it's no good.
You can use your piano technically.
Oh, that's true actually.
No, but like yeah, it's just I think the tricky part is like it rotates right?
Yeah, that
Like,
makes it difficult.
Like, and you have to like sometimes move the camera a lot and sometimes not a lot, so you need like this analog inputs, right? So I was thinking of doing voice commands, but then I was like, that's like, am I gonna be like 90 degrees that side, 32 degrees that side? Like, I feel like that would be challenging. So I feel like the connects might work because you can like, you know, you can sort of like have this thing and like, oh, I go a little bit to the right, now I go a lot to the right. I feel like the connect's totally gonna work out.
I think what could be really funny. I don't even know how you'd be able to set this up. You need to have like 5 people controlling the character at the same time. So like someone has the W key, someone has the A key, someone has the, you know, and then someone has jump. So
Twitch plays.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you like everyone's got one key, and you've got to kind of coordinate and try and press all the keys right. It's a bit like the game Quap, right? Or whatever that game is, right? You have to control all the limbs at the same time. Honestly, Twitch chat plays the clock tower could be amusing. Because the best part about it, you can just leave the computer. You can just like go to sleep and then they'll still be doing it, right? And just see if they make it eventually. I think they make it all the way to the top. Because the worst part about that is that people start trolling. You know, they'll you'll get to the end and then someone will just jump too early and just wipe the entire thing.
Can you control who you get in the instance with in the clock tower? Because you could just do a tournament where you like have an elimination, like a scratch race where like the bottom 2 people out of every 5 get eliminated and the top 3 move on.
Nah, I don't think that's possible.
No. And it still uses the really old system, doesn't it? It's like a PvP map,
like the story mode.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah. It's very
like
different.
It resets like every 10 minutes and you have to wait. It's really annoying.
Yeah. It's interesting content.
I don't think anyone will ever beat though. Like there's like this video of like I think it's like a 4-year-old.
Yeah, it gets posted every year. It gets posted every year.
It's really good though.
Easy karma farm.
Yeah. It is an easy karma farm because it's to shame people into trying it. Like, listen, this 4-year-old beat it. Are you worse at Guild Wars 2 than a 4-year-old?
What you could do is like have a second keyboard where you're actually doing it, but have like your cat sitting at your keyboard, and you're like, my cat did the jumping puzzle, but you're secretly controlling it, and you'll get like Omega Karma because like the cat's like touching the keyboard, but you're like jumping secretly, and I think Reddit would still believe it.
Stealing my ideas right now.
Yeah, these are big ideas.
See how it is. Yeah.
We love to see it. Very nice. Wait, you could do blindfolded clock tower.
I feel like you can eventually do that. Like,
I mean, it's doable, yeah. I mean, people can do people can do the entirety of Mario 64 speed, like blindfolded. So, like,
you could have like a guide dog relative, like you'd have like another person with you,
telling you
like,
what to do.
Tells you what to do while you're blindfolded.
You could screen share, and they have to lead you through the clock tower.
Yeah. They guide dog you. They shepherd you up the climb.
This is some content. Okay, I'm excited about this now.
That will be pretty fun.
We're leaking all the good content ideas.
Yeah,
right
we are leaking the content. Yeah, we are actually fully leaking the content for what we're doing in the next patch, I guess. Well, when Halloween comes out. But anyway, I think that's kind of didn't really want to talk about much more. It's a little bit of a shorter tea time today, but that's because I just wanted to do a bit of a news roundup. Is there anything else that we wanted to talk about? That's about it. It is fairly quiet right now, I'd say, in the game overall. Did we miss anything about any of the various topics that we went over? I kind of don't think so. We got it all, in my opinion. Including Arc DPS as a bonus.
Arch DPS.
Yeah. Raidcore.gg.
Oh, that's never happening.
Yeah, it's gonna, I mean, that's gonna take longer than Alliances. Raidcore.gg is actually a longer development cycle than Alliances.
Apparently Sognus has been brought into the project, but I still think it's not going anywhere.
Very nice. Any day now, surely.
Delta just he doesn't know how to deliver.
Yeah.
He's big on promises, not big on delivering.
Wow. My God, that's a harsh condemnation now.
I mean, you have to say it, or else maybe it'll light a fire under him to prove me wrong.
Oh. Yeah, there was that one thing, but honestly, I don't think this is actually that interesting to talk about. But I'll just say it now because I found it funny. Everyone got trolled by Lazy Peon releasing a Guild Wars 2 video. Oh yeah. Man, that was good.
That was not a troll. That was not a troll.
Well,
That was an earnest video on his part.
I mean, it's possible. Guild Wars 3 waiting room. I guess we could talk about that actually. Because this is an opinion that comes up a lot actually. I don't want to do any React content. That's garbage. Okay, it's garbage.
Wow, I didn't react. I feel called out.
Yeah,
I should react to it.
Okay, honestly, I would. I admit it. I would definitely watch Nike react to that. That would be content. Actually, I admit that. But a lot of people are kind of in this. I think this is an MMO thing in general, not Guild Wars 2 to be clear. I think people are really restless for a new game. That this is like the sentiment I really get, not just in the Guild Wars community, but in the MMO community in general, right? Because it's always like, when is Guild Wars 3? I get like multiple people asking me every day, when is Guild Wars 3? When is Guild Wars 3? When is Guild Wars 3? Right? When's the Riot MMO coming out? When's Ashes of Creation coming out? Why do we think that's happening? Because it's definitely more than it used to be. I think people were less restless about the MMOs. And what is interesting to me is that, am I crazy? Maybe I'm just soft in my old age. I kind of like MMOs right now. You know, they're not. I don't view them as bad. I think Guild Wars 2's in a pretty good spot. I think WoW's in a pretty good spot as well. I think 14's doing okay
at this point. You know, like
who wants something fresh? I guess,
hype.
right?
The problem when a new MMO comes out, everybody's playing together, everybody's like leveling together for the first time. It's like hype, right? I really like MMO launches.
I just feel like new MMOs can never compete with existing MMOs.
Because there's too much content, too much polish as well.
You can't launch with enough content and enough polish to keep people engaged for more than like a couple of weeks until the hype wears off. And it's just really... It's kind of almost an insurmountable problem to the point where I would imagine that anything resembling Guild Wars 3 is much more likely to be like a Guild Wars 2 remaster, where your account
Overwatch 2
ports over 1-to-1 to like the new game, but it's like updated graphics.
Yeah,
like that seems way more likely than like a new game with like no content launching.
There is actually somebody linked me an article this week. You know, we know ArenaNet's making some game besides Guild Wars 2, right? Like there's job listings. We know they're doing something Unreal. But we don't know what they're doing, right? We do know that there's some game being made. For a long time, a big rumor was that ArenaNet was doing a Horizon MMO.
Yeah, because there was Horizon lately.
Yeah, there was a rumor that Sony had teamed up with NCSoft to do Horizon MMO, and then ArenaNet, like, hey, they have some project, maybe they're the ones doing it. I read this article, which was another rumor, that it wasn't ArenaNet doing it. That it was actually, I think it was like the Lineage people doing it. Again, this is all rumors. Okay. This was
Confirmed.
From some German MMO website, but I found that's really interesting because I'm like, if it's not Horizon, then what are they doing? Interesting. Very interesting. But yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me if they were co-developing.
Yeah,
like
helping out.
Like look what ManaWorks was doing with New World. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a point where ANET was at their lowest after IBS, where they were farming out work, like ghostwriting content for other games, essentially, to keep revenue where it needed to be.
Yeah,
helping out with like some of the, I guess, like studios over in Korea that are making stuff. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
I think you're right.
It's interesting though.
I think you're right, Nike. Right? The game's just old. I think the games are solved. I think what people are almost looking for is
they want that discovery phase.
Yeah, discovery phase. And I think
we don't get discovery phase anymore because of alpha and betas that are open, and the game is solved by launch.
True. This is actually a huge problem with New World, by the way. I think this is actually one of the things that really didn't help New World at all. The game came out and people were already insane at it, knew everything about it, exactly where everything was and how to beat it, right? It's actually a huge problem, I think, with a lot of like modern MMO development, is that you don't ever have this kind of like uncharted territory adventure, and we won't. We know we won't, because upcoming, maybe for the Riot MMO, maybe they'll have it a bit more closed because it's a huge company, so they can probably do internal testing way better. But we we know Ashes of Creation isn't. They're going to be doing open betas, multiple open betas. I mean, honestly, if that game ever releases, right, like 5 years from now, maybe that game's going to come out, right? But there'll have been 1 million betas, 1 million alphas, completely open testing. So there won't be that discovery phase. Everything with New World, there was no discovery phase. I think that's what people are really looking for. And the problem is that with modern MMOs, the discovery phase is minuscule. And this is not MMOs, this is games, right? In general. Like if you look at a game like Baldur's Gate 3, that game is colossal. It's massive. It's an absolute sprawling piece of artwork, essentially. But of course, everyone figured it out really quickly. Like, like people had early access, right? There was like beta testing and stuff. So people knew loads of stuff about it. And then of course, afterwards, people figured everything and found everything insanely quickly with it. Like this is kind of like MMOs almost get oppressed a little bit by the internet, almost, I think, with just how fast knowledge transference is and how quickly everyone figures everything else out. It's really hard for new MMOs to kind of stick, I think, because of that, because it doesn't stay a mystery for very long. And of course, yeah, like when you're releasing your new MMO, you have to compete with like 10 years of content with every other game. And of course, all of the refinement and polish, because every MMO release is pretty broken. People don't remember Guild Wars 2 launch, but guys, do we not remember how Guild Wars 2 launch was? Like
the trading post didn't work for the first week, essentially.
Do we not remember this? You had like the culling issues in World versus World. Oh. You didn't have squads at all until Heart of Thorns. By the way, remember that? Like the game was balanced in a slightly amusing way. PvP Condi didn't have a leaderboard. Condi damage was completely scuffed outside of PvP, obviously. Like the game was a total fiesta on launch. It was fun, but let's not forget the fact that the game was busted, right? And every new release is, so it always looks really, really rough. And hell, there's a bunch of like duping exploits, right? And that really damaged the reputation of New World, is that the game had some problems with the engine and some duping bugs. Bear in mind, there are a lot of duping bugs in Guild Wars 2. Hell, there still are. But, it's really hard for a new MMO to stick. But I think people are definitely looking for something else. The question is, will it ever arrive? Yeah.
They'll try, but I don't know. I think New World is sort of like the most you could expect. Think of how much confidence the studio has shown in New World. Like, no other developer would have stuck around.
That game would have shut down. Yeah,
they would have pulled the plug
for sure, yeah.
after like 6 months. And that's because of Amazon. Like, no other developer is going to do that. So, and it's hard to imagine like a new MMO launching, that had a better launch than New World almost in terms of like amount of people playing. Maybe so it's like that. If that's the best case scenario, then what hope is there for anyone else trying to?
I feel like Lost Ark sort of like sidestepped the issue in the West because it already had it was already out in like Korea for like a year or something. So they already had sort of like build up some end game when it came over. So there was a bit more content for people to actually like play through.
Yeah, that is the way to do it, except for the fact that like there's no good games in Korea that aren't like also already in the West.
Yeah.
Got someone's coming over. It's well. Did you see that the
Bless Online?
Wasn't it like Blue Protocol?
Is that game out or not? I've been hearing about that for ages.
I think it's coming, but something I found wild is that the old Guild Wars 2 game director, I think, is in charge of like bringing it to the West.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Interesting.
Yeah, what's his face? The guy who did
Mike Z.
Mike Z.
That was his name.
Yeah.
I think he's like a Blue Protocol, sort of in charge of that. I think.
Yeah.
I might be wrong.
No, he is. That's for sure.
I saw an interview with him about it. I was like, whoa, I remember this person. Alright, anyway, I kind of got to go do HCM, everyone.
That's going to about round things out. You would no DPS meter. Honestly,
that's like double blind prog.
Yeah.
It's like you're blind on every angle.
It's rough. Look, I was supposed to be doing HCM yesterday. You know what happened? My team said, no ARC, no reason to even log in. That's actually serious. They're like, no ARC, we're out, we're done. So
they should use Guild Wars 2 Helper by Farbstaff.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
is that another option? Another.
It is an option.
Yeah.
Farbstoff, the website's still up. You guys can Google it. It's there.
Anyway,
it's one of the old school DPS meters.
Oh.
It has really good functionality. If you look at the list of features, it has like world boss like timer built into it. Like it has like tons of cool features.
Very nice. Yeah. It's like Blish combined. But anyway, let's quickly wrap things up here. Yes, Lara is getting out of here. Boom. Quick, say something. Promote yourself real quick before you run away.
Humanity, yes. Type it in your browser.
Do
YouTube, Twitter, sometimes. That's it. I'm out.
Boom. Lara's out. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see ya. And I guess that's a good place to kind of wrap things up as well on our end, because I think we've arrived at the end of the discussion. Nike, you can also now do the same.
Yeah. I have a Twitch channel with some Guild Wars 2, some Zwift, and a YouTube channel where sometimes I make productive videos and other times I make videos that are meant to be comment engagement farms. And they're all successful at the intended goal. Yeah.
Very good. And of course, I'm here as well. Find Nike on YouTube. Find Lara on Twitch and YouTube. Find Nike on Twitch as well for Zwift and Raid streams. Follow this stream. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoy the tea time. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. We will see you all next time. Click all the links. Follow all the streams. Watch all the videos. And we'll see you next time. Take it easy, gamers. We're out of here. Boom!